Hi, today I have a USDA Choice Angus Tomahawk Steak. So, what is a tomahawk steak? This is essentially a ribeye, but the tomahawk has a little bit extra bone that's French, meaning it's cleaned of the meat and whatever is here, and you get the bone. Usually, the meat here is just chewy and the membrane is tough, but this is more for appearance sakes, and the reason it's called a tomahawk steak, it looks like a little tomahawk axe, and this is 2.5 pounds, about a little more than 2 inches thick, about 2 inches. So it's a nice hearty piece of meat. So I like a steak with the bone in, adds flavor. And since it's USDA choice, it's well marbled, has nice fat. So when you cook it, it gets tender and the fat adds a little butteriness to it. And from what I read online, the tomahawk steak, the origins come from the cattle drives along the Rio Grande. And traditionally it was served with sort of like Mexican spices. But for me, I just like seasoning with salt and pepper. So basically, uh, towel dry the steak, then season generously with salt, since this is, and just let it sit at room temperature about an hour or two to come up to temperature, so it's not ice cold when you cook. And what's interesting is this has recipes on how to cook it. This is the initial sear and then cook at a low oven or low temperature. For them, a low temperature is 375, but I'm going to shoot for 250. And this is the reverse sear, where you gently heat the steak up to temperature and then you sear it to get the final brownness. But today I'm going to do the sear and then finish in a low oven. But step one, season generously all sides of the steak with salt. Then I like holding the fingers high, so that way the salt spreads. If you keep your fingers low, you kind of leave a trail of salt, but when you hold it high, it sprinkles all over. Then I'll season the sides. So when you're seasoning the sides, I kind of hold it lower since you're only seasoning a strip. So salt all around and let it come to room temperature in an hour or two. So that's step one. And I'll be back. All right, traditionally a tomahawk steak, a tomahawk ribeye steak is cooked on a grill because of the large size of the steak and the bone. But right now it's fall, it's wet and cold outside, and we like steak all year round. So what I'm going to do is cook it on a grill pan. My traditional cast iron is the bone gets in the way, it's not wide enough, so the grill pan has flat sides. So what I'm going to do is brown the outsides of the steak and then put it on a rack and cook low temperature to slowly raise the temperature to our desired doneness, which is about 135, 140. I'll split the difference and use 137. So next step is to sear the sides of the steak to give it nice color. All right, I've added some high temperature avocado oil, letting that warm up. And before I sear the steak, the salt has drawn out some moisture from the beef. So I'm going to dry it off so it could get nice seared crust without a lot of steaming. But there's still salt on it, and hopefully the moisture has reabsorbed into the beef to give it flavor. So there's the oil is slightly smoking a little. So now I'm going to sear each side for about 2 minutes to get a nice brown crust. Just lightly press the steak down to make sure it gets good contact. The bone is free of the side of the pan. So roughly 2 minutes per side, and then also I'll brown the edges to give it a nice crust on the fat too. The stove, the hob is on high heat, so that encourages the browning. I have the oven preheated to 250. So sear and then slowly bring the ribeye steak up to temperature. I'm just lightly pressing down to make sure there's good contact. This was a 2.5 pound steak, so what's that, 30 ounces, 40 ounces of beef. I'll move the oil around a little. Get that paper out of the way. Been about 90 seconds. I'm going to flip it over, take a look. There's some nice browning right there. While the top has already browned, I'm going to add butter to it to give it a nice coating of butter. If you're going to use high heat on a grill, some people will wrap the bone, but since I'm mainly cooking the meat portion and this is going to go into a low oven, I'm just going to leave the bone alone. But if you're on a grill with high heat, sometimes the bone will burn and look kind of gnarly. So remember, part of this steak is for appearances also. So we're mainly doing this for the sear, so that's good. Now I'm going to sear the sides. This is the other side. Sear the fat side. Remember to sear all sides of the steak. And what I'll do is just give it a final coat of butter and then put it into the oven. Getting some good color on the steak. Turn off the heat. Okay, that's done. I'm going to move this over to the baking dish, or I'm using a rack. Let that cool down a bit. Hit it up with butter. to all sides. Also add more salt, because I'm sure some of it cooked off in the oil. Of course, you could use whatever seasonings you like, but we generally like salt, pepper. Thinking about pepper, add some pepper on it. All sides. And then into a 250 oven it goes. And we like our steak about medium. So that's about 140. All right, it's been an hour in the oven. When I last checked 5 minutes ago, it was about 132, and pretty much I'm gonna let it go from now on. I mean, just let it, take it out of the oven. Just one final check. 120, inching up to 130, and slowing down. So it's about 130. And slowly going above that. So I think 133, 134 is good enough for now. We'll just let it rest for about 10 minutes and then I'll carve into the tomahawk ribeye. The big steak with the big handle. Alright, the tomahawk steak is finished. It's been resting for about 10 minutes after I pulled it out the oven. Now there's a couple ways to carve the steak. Some people will take it off the bone and then carve the meat. But I like to present it on the bone because it looks more dramatic. You could cut it this way because that way everybody gets a little slice of all the different meats. But I actually like cutting it this way. So the cap gets its own, you separate the cap from the eye of the steak. So basically, sharp knife and just start slicing down. And depends on how thick you want it. We tend to like steak a little on the thinner side. Still rosy pink, but not bloody red. It's sort of in the medium zone right now. Medium, and then as I'm probably get closer to the eye, it's going to be more medium rare, but that's okay. That's a nice fat piece. So as I said, there's a couple ways to cut it. Cut it off the bone, cut it this way so everybody gets the eye and the cap, or just cut depending on the type of meat, so the cap and the eye are separate and people could pick and choose or combine. So that's the cap. Now let's take a look at the eye. Let me slide over as I kick the camera. Now you could slice this way or slice this way to be consistent with the cuts. So this is the eye. Notice that the grain is actually running up and down, so you could actually slice it kind of at a bias, so you're cutting against the grain. But this is a very tender ribeye, USDA choice, so on the upside it's going to be nice and tender. And before I present, I'll just kind of put it on a plate and reassemble the bits. So I'll finish carving and show you the final results. Alright, here's the finished steak. The bone's right here, and I sliced the meat. Meat is a nice rosy pink, so it's a medium. I've also sauteed some mushrooms with onions, green onions, a little garlic, and butter and olive oil. So that's our side. I have other side dishes, but this is I like steak, buttered mushrooms, and I should have drizzled more melted butter on top, but it's ready to go. I wonder if I should try it. No, I'll wait for everyone else to show up. Enjoy. Have a great meal.